Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Justice Revolution. I am your host, James the Patriot. I've got my partners in crime today, no pun intended. Justice, my producer, thank you. She was a little under the weather last time, and I'm glad to have her back. And we have our another guest with us today, guest host, I guess you can say, Kevin Sonar Hall. He was on with us a while ago. Kev, hello, how are you?
Great. How are you doing today?
Good. Good. Happy New Year coming up. This is the last broadcast of 2022. Hallelujah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get this year over with, right?
Yeah. Hey, Kevin, nice to meet you.
Yes. Nice to meet you too, Justice.
So for those of you who don't know, I'm just to give you a little refresher. So Kevin and I connected a long time ago. He runs the military vaccine affidavits group on Telegram. He's been a big proponent in shutting down these jab mandates and such through the military. So there's been some big things that happened with that recently. Kevin, do you want to give everybody a quick update on that? And then we can jump into the topic of the day.
Sure. Just the top level view is the NDAA was signed that had the language in it that forced the military to rescind within 30 days the 24 August 21 mandate by Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense. So it was not, it's a step in the right direction, but it was not, the end all be all in terms of it didn't reinstate anybody. It didn't prevent, any of the or undo any of the other harms that have been done. It simply undoes that one piece of paper, and it doesn't prevent anything from happening again. So it's a step in the right direction, and we're right to rejoice. That we'll take every win that we can get, but I think we still have a long ways to go.
Yeah, and that was issued by a federal district judge, or I can't remember if that went up to the Court of Appeals. Do you know where that is?
Oh, no. Well, so this was the NDAA, right? Congress signed this into law that the Air Force has to.
Oh, gotcha.
All branches have to stop, and it just undoes the Secretary of Defense's mandate saying that everybody has to get it. That's kind of all that happens. It wasn't driven by the courts. In fact, they're now trying to argue that all the court cases are moot because of this. You know how that works. So we'll see how that plays out.
It's a great step.
Yeah, it is a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, this is the unfortunate scenario of the republic that we live in. And let's just be very clear, people. We do not, and I repeat, we do not live in a democracy. So any politician who says our democracy is at stake is like, hey, you must be part of Venezuela, because that's not what we have here in the United States of America. We have a republic. It's a constitutional republic, a representative form. The beautiful thing about that is, our rights are guaranteed and they can't be trampled on willy-nilly. They're trying to. The flip side of that is when there is a major issue like what was before the military with the Secretary of Defense Austin, it takes a very long time to get Congress moving to undo what he did with the stroke of a pen, which is why there was a lot of court actions taken. Now, it still doesn't change the fact that how many hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands,
8,000 plus kicked out.
Yeah, they were just booted. Basically, for lack of a better word, were they dishonorably discharged? I mean, what?
No, none of them. So there's a couple wrap-ups. None that I know of were dishonorably discharged, but that doesn't change the fact that it's essentially a black stain.
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise to me that the United States military has missed its recruiting goals by, what was the percentage, Kevin?
I don't know.
I heard it was more than 30%. I mean,
wouldn't surprise
who
me.
wants to do that? I mean, I had this conversation with my nephew. He's 18 years old, and he loves to work with his hands, and he wants to be a mechanic. And I said, hey, why don't you look at the Air Force? Why don't you become a diesel mechanic or something like that? And he went in and talked with a recruiter, and he said, well, hey, I'm interested, but if I'm going to have to, to do this, I'm not interested. And they're like, yeah, you're going to have to. He's like, okay, well, thanks. We'll see you later.
Right.
I mean, that's sad because, the wonderful things that the Air Force can do. I mean, Kevin, you're a testament to that. I mean, how many years have you been in the military in the Air Force?
Well, they've given a lot to me, 23 plus.
I know.
And, I am an advocate for, if you know what you want to do and you understand the risk of, for lack of a better term, that you're getting into, there's
Yeah.
still an honorable profession to be had. And it's not,
Yeah.
but it's harder and harder to stand up for those right and find the niches where you're able to do that and hold your ground. I remember having this very conversation that, you and I having about a democracy and a republic, with a squadron commander back when I was just a baby, F-16 pilot. And, and I'm like, no, it's a republic, not a democracy. And he's like, well, some people think that. Right. And
no, there's no thinking.
you
Okay.
just, even in the middle where our profession is to protect and defend the Constitution, there's a lack of knowledge that runs very deep. My favorite of all time was, well, we live in a republic because the Republicans are in charge. Democracy, if the Democrats were in charge. I'm like, well, okay, I see the logic, but
boy, we need to go back to civics class. Yeah. I mean, and the problem is they're not teaching this in the civics class, which, and Justice will wholeheartedly agree here. This is why it falls on us as parents. For those of us who are able to homeschool our children, like I know Justice has done, God bless you. For those of us like myself and my wife, there's it's just unfortunately it's not in the cards, and so it still falls back onto me and my wife to teach our kids these things because we know the schools aren't going to do it. And I've had this conversation. I mean, my daughter, she just turned 16 yesterday, so that opens up a whole new world of heart attacks and strokes that potentially befall me. But aside from that, she came home from school a while ago, and she was really concerned about the environment, and she's concerned, well, what's about all these cars and putting all this carbon gas in the air and so on and so forth. And I said, sweetheart, I've said this before. I'm a Christian man. I believe in God, and so I said, sweetheart, do you think God would have put us on this planet if He knew that we could destroy it and kill all of us? Do you think He would have done that? And she sat back for a second. She's like, no. I was like, yeah. So let me put it to you this way. The scientists have found that there was 10 times more carbon in the air when dinosaurs were on the earth than there is now. Guess what else was more prevalent on the earth then? Just guess. Because she came from science class, right? So photosynthesis, right? She's like, the wheels are turning in her head. She goes, trees? I was like, yes! Isn't that amazing? The more carbon in the air, the more plants and trees, which is why you have greenhouses that specifically pump carbon into those greenhouses to promote the growth of those plants. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, because God knew this when He created this world, that at some point in time, we human beings would need a mode of transportation, planes, trains, and automobiles that would emit carbon. So He had to have something that would eat that carbon up. And, oh, by the way, the byproduct of that is oxygen. Crazy. Were you going to say something, Justice? Oh, we just lost her. She's on her laptop, so she said it might be spotty going back and forth. But anyway, I digress. So we were off on that. Where was I going with this tangent, Kevin?
It started with the military.
That's right.
Oh, we were talking about how basic civics.
Basic civics, yeah. It falls back on us as parents. And even if you're not a parent, just be a good neighbor. Teach those who you come in contact with about the foundational principles that establish this great country that we call home. And that's the end of the day. So on that subject, I actually I have been seeing a lot of chatter in the Telegram groups regarding jurisdiction. There's a lot of confusion, I think, from a multitude of sources on what constitutes jurisdiction. First of all, what it is, how the court gets it. Is it depending on the way your name is styled or the gold fringe flag that's flying in the courtroom? I mean, all of these things and all of these theories that are out there. And so I wanted to have this broadcast before the end of the year so we could help dispel some of these myths. Now, we're not going to be spending a lot of time on this today because I could spend 6 hours talking about this. We are, however, going to touch on this today, either next week or in a couple of weeks from now. I'm going to have my good buddy Brandon, the Big Sib. He's going to join me. We're going to talk about jurisdiction in more detail, but let's just start with the basics. Okay, and this is what I tell people is the way that jurisdiction works is it's what grants the court the authority to hear a particular matter. Okay, so when you go back and you read the Constitution, so you read the federal Constitution, you read your state Constitution. You know, the three of us on this call today here, we all live here in Utah. So the Utah Constitution is the prevailing Constitution here. When you read that and you see that the judicial branch is one of the three separate but equal branches of government, and that the judicial branch's sole purpose is to determine, basically their idea is to determine what was the legislative intent of a particular law or statute. Okay, I want to be very clear that the controlling law, the number one supreme law that comes from God, which is incorporated into our governments through the Constitution and through the state constitution. Nothing that is put on paper by the 300 and something other idiots that call themselves Congress, and that's here in Utah. I don't know how many are in the United States House of Representatives now. Nothing that those people put on paper constitutes law unless it is done in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. So this is one of the things that that really struck me, and one of the reasons why we have been why the wool has been pulled over our eyes is that we have been led to believe that anything that those people put on paper and that the governor signs into law is binding upon us as citizens of the Republic of Utah. Okay, the only way that is possible is if the Constitution specifically enumerates those powers. Let me tell you what I mean. And while I'm looking this up, Kevin or Justice, do you guys want to add to that? Anything you guys have?
I'm all ears at this point, James, because this has always been a question for me that I never researched. So I have nothing to add except for when my computer died, the climate hoax.
I noticed that. Yeah.
Climate hoax. I agree with you on the climate.
Okay.
Kevin?
Well, go ahead, Kev. You have anything you want to add to that?
I like the starting with the authority. Where does their authority come from? And you can always ask the judge straight out, where do you get your authority from? You know, they're supposed to have oaths on file, and a lot of them don't, right? And you can you nip a lot of this in the bud by actually articulating the question that you just asked, you know, out loud. You may not have the answer right away, but they're supposed to be able to get you the answer. By what authority are you claiming to be able to do this? I mean, this goes from HOAs to every aspect. Start asking. That's the right question to ask.
Yeah.
And then we'll figure it out.
So can I add to that for a second? Because something that came across my awareness just recently, the other day, about, I did send it to you, James. It was about
yes, the seals.
Stamps, the court seals.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll
talk about that. Okay. We'll talk about that because that is an interesting thing, because it goes back to the whole due process. So let's go back to the very beginning. Okay. So let me share my screen again. Since I'm here in the state of Utah, I'm going to share with you all the Utah State Constitution. Okay. Let me know when this pops up on your screen there, Justice. Okay. Yeah, all right. So for any of you who are watching this, whether you're here in Utah or whatever state you're in, every state that was admitted to the Union was required to publish a state constitution. The way that these things work is, you'll notice this is different from our federal constitution, and is that the very first article here is the Declaration of Rights. Now, let me just point out that some people are starting their journey understanding the civics again, and there is not just one constitution. No. So think of it this way. The easiest way to think of this is think of the United States Constitution, the federal Constitution, That encompasses all of the United States and all of the citizens within. Now, don't get me wrong. Just because you say you're a citizen, it does not grant anyone jurisdiction over you. That's one of the myths I want to dispel right now. Okay? We are all sovereign men and women, citizens of this republic. Okay? That's
And the Constitution is not protecting our rights. That's the Bill of Rights. It's holding our government accountable to protect our rights.
yes and no. Okay? Our rights, the Constitution does not grant us rights. It's set up in place to govern the actions of the government.
Right.
Right? So when the founding fathers got together and they were contemplating the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, you know, they did it backwards. Instead of doing the Declaration of Rights, instead of laying out the rights of the people, they started laying out the foundations of the government. And then at the end of the day, it was actually John Madison who said, I've got a problem with this. I feel that there's going to be, at some point in time, the government is just going to run unchecked, and I can see tyranny coming. I can see it coming. And so that's when they sat down and they drafted the first 10 amendments, which are known as the Bill of Rights. Those bills of rights do not grant you your rights. They are merely a declaration, okay? A declaration of your rights. We as people, as sovereign men and women, as creations of our God Almighty, we are born with certain unalienable rights, and among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's straight out of the Declaration of Independence. Okay? That's what the founders were laying down. It's like this is what we know to be true. They call them self-evident, right? So building onto that, every state that was admitted to the Union was required to form a state constitution. So again, we have the federal constitution, and I'll take an analogy. Imagine that the federal constitution is the corporation of Walmart, right? So it's Walmart Inc. And I'm not saying that that's the same. I just want to give an analogy.
Right.
Make it easy.
Right.
The state constitutions would be for like each individual Walmart store, wherever they are, having its own policies and procedures governing specifically what happens in that store, if that makes sense.
Right.
Okay. This is what the founders knew. And they said, okay, if we're going to admit states to the Union, they need to declare the rights of the people, and they need to talk about what each state is guaranteed. If you read in the federal constitution, it states that every state is afforded and guaranteed a Republican form of government. Okay. That does not mean the Republican Party. That's a political party. Different. Okay. A Republican form of government is one that lays down the rights, guarantees rights of its citizens, and that no person or citizen may be deprived of those rights without due process of law. So let's talk about those rights. Here in Utah, we have 30. We have 30 rights that have been enumerated. All that this means is that this is written down and that the government is prohibited from writing any laws that violate or infringe on any of these rights. Okay? So the first one, I'm not going to go through all of these. I'll just touch on a couple of them. The first one is all persons have inherent and inalienable right to enjoy and defend their lives and liberties, to acquire, possess, and protect property, to worship according to the dictates of their consciences, to assemble peaceably, protest against wrongs, and petition for redress of grievances, to communicate freely their thoughts and opinions, being responsible for the abuse of that right. Okay, that's just duh. All of this goes along with the common law, which is common freaking sense. We know that. Okay? All political power is inherent in the people. Utah inseparable from the Union. We talk about religious liberty, habeas corpus, the right to keep and bear arms, due process of law, okay, trial by jury, Section 10, In capital cases, the right of trial by jury shall remain inviolate. It talks about how it shall consider persons.
So we're stuck in a situation where these rights are obviously being violated and trampled on. Let's just take the January 6th prisoners. They've had no due process.
They haven't.
How
They've had-
how do they find relief, and who is to hold them, the powers that be accountable for this?
Well, and that's the beautiful thing. Is like, so I've actually talked with Brandon about that. I was able to secure some charging documents, some information on some of these January 6th political prisoners, and the court is wholly lacking subject matter jurisdiction. We'll get to that, and we'll talk about what the remedy is. But the problem is that the people don't know this. They're relying upon corrupt liars, members of the bar, and they're in on it.
Of course.
They're in on it.
I mean,
Okay.
there's two schools of thought. Mine is this is flushing out the rats.
Mhm.
How else would you find them? How else would you see them? And we just pray that we have our day. And
Yep. So, you guys, what I would implore you, if you want to make this one of your New Year's resolutions, read your state constitution. Read the enumeration of your rights in your state. These are, by the way, just because they're written here does not mean that this is all that there are. There are other rights that you have that are not written here. Matter of fact, Section 25, rights retained by the people. This enumeration of rights shall not be construed to impair or deny others retained by the people. The courts have determined that the word shall is mandatory. That means if you go into court, or if you stand up to a government official and say, I have a right to do this, and you firmly believe it, and they say, well, it's not listed in the Constitution, you can say, tough luck, buck. It's a right that I have retained. Article
good
1,
to know.
Section 25.
It's
Read it
important.
and weep.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's important to know. That's a very good one for you to look at, especially if you are dabbling down the road of any kind of a pro se lawsuit for yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. A couple of others I'm going to touch on real quick that are huge. This one right here, Section 26, is by far the most powerful declaration of rights that we have in this state. Kevin, can you see this? Did we lose Kevin?
We lost Kevin again. He seems to be having some difficulties. He'll be back.
Okay. Justice, why don't you go ahead and read this for us?
Here he is. Okay.
Oh,
I'm
you
off.
back, Kevin?
Kevin, we lost you. James asked you a question. So
Yeah, I lost you. The audio's not the greatest right now. Give it a second; it'll settle out.
Okay. All right. I was just gonna ask and see if you wouldn't mind reading this. Maybe, maybe not.
Okay.
Justice, why don't you go ahead and read this for us?
Okay, Article 1, Section 26, provisions mandatory and prohibitory. The provisions of this Constitution are mandatory and prohibitory unless by express words they are declared to be otherwise.
Okay, so what is your understanding of that? What do you take from that?
That it's mandatory, but it's also prohibiting someone or something from, I guess, trampling on it or your rights of it.
Exactly. In layman's terms, what this phrase means is that unless it is written here, unless this is an enumerated power that we, the people, granted you, the Utah state government, it is prohibited. And what's written here is mandatory. It must be followed. Okay? So with that in mind, let's go back here to Section 18. No bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligation of contracts shall be passed. Okay, again, the word shall has been interpreted as must. So it cannot be passed. All right. You guys familiar with what a bill of attainder is?
I'm not.
Okay, let me just
Can you
pull
give
up
us an example as you cite those So like a real life example that would give people more of an understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, first of all, we need to know what a bill of attainder is. Okay.
Mhm.
What it is it's an act of the legislature declaring a person or a group of people guilty of some crime and punishing them, often without a trial.
Oh,
Okay.
that's January 6th.
There you go. Okay. So what it means is that the history of this, again, was that in England, it referred to people who were declared attainted, meaning their civil rights were nullified. They could no longer own property or pass property to their family. They would normally be punished by judicial execution with the property left behind and escheated to the crown, in this case, the king. Okay. So this is what the founders wanted to, they wanted to get away from that. So, oh, whoops, I went to the wrong one. Okay. Bill of attainder is any law that if you did this, that you were automatically guilty. It violates your right to due process of law. Okay. Ex post facto law is basically they cannot pass a law that would grant immunity for something that they did in the past.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, what has recently happened where they've done that?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me head to another section here within Utah, the Utah law. Okay. Let me go to Utah Code 53G, Chapter 8, 6. Okay, 603. All right. Okay. This is a Utah law, a Utah statute. I have a friend of mine who was prosecuted under this. Now, I'm going to read this, and I want to know from you two, does this constitute, in your opinion, a bill of attainder? Okay. A person is guilty of criminal trespass if the person does the following: enters or remains unlawfully upon school property and intends to cause annoyance, blah, 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 blah. That's section A. Or enters or remains without authorization if notice against entry or remaining has been given by blah, 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 blah.
So I gotta look. So this was just created
2018.
because school property, I'm like, why would that come into effect except for the most recent chain of events?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this law right here is what was used to punish parents who were going to this one and another law were used as what to punish parents who were going to school board meetings and speaking up against COVID restrictions. Okay. So most notably, Mike Brown.
On publicly funded schools.
Yeah. Yep. So let me ask you this. So again, going back to the definition of what a bill of attainder is. A bill of attainder is a law that makes someone or a class of people guilty if they do something.
Right.
Okay. The issue with this law is just that, is that it violates our right to due process of law. Let me go back to the Utah Constitution. Due process of law. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Okay. Liberty. What is liberty?
Freedom.
Your freedom to move unobstructed. Okay. You can go anywhere as long as it doesn't infringe on someone else's rights. So I ask you again, going back to where I just was, does not this law violate not only that constitutional provision, but also the other one about the bill of attainder? What do you guys think?
I believe so.
I agree.
How do the people get this stricken? And basically everything's a court case.
Unfortunately, that is so again, going back to the reason why we have three separate branches of government. You have the legislative branch, which is tasked with creating laws in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. They have wholly subverted that, federal and state. You have the executive branch, which is tasked with enforcing the law. You have the judicial branch, which is tasked with interpreting the law. So every law that is passed is unfortunately presumed to be constitutional unless it's challenged. So how do we challenge this stuff? How do we do this? And this ties back into the whole jurisdiction part of it, is if you're being criminally prosecuted for this, you have every element of this statute must be met in order for the court to obtain subject matter jurisdiction. So let me go over here to American jurisprudence. Let's talk about jurisdiction. How does it work? Okay.
So when, I mean, this is the pickle that I feel like we are in. It's the people that are creating the jurisdiction. The people at the very top are the ones that are corrupt. So
Yes.
this is the problem, because
Yeah.
you've got the people that give doctors medical licenses, but they're corrupt. They can take the medical. How do they get this authority? It's self-imposed authority. So
Yeah.
how do we fix this?
Well, again, it goes back to understanding, how does the court get jurisdiction to begin with? And this is any court. It doesn't matter if it's the Supreme Court of the United States, the Supreme Court of Utah, whatever state you're in, the appellate court, the district court, or even those injustice courts, as I call them. They all must have subject matter jurisdiction. Okay. So again, there's four legs, and this is what I learned this from Richard Cornforth, who is a fantastic individual. I'm not sure if he's still around, still teaching. Justice, you sent me one of his videos, and I reviewed it, and I was like, God, this guy's right on it.
Yeah.
So he talks about jurisdiction is like a four-legged table. The court must have all four legs in order for them to adjudicate a matter. So two of those legs are the parties. There's got to be a plaintiff. There has to be a defendant. Well, that's easy enough. One of those legs is personal jurisdiction over the person. We'll talk about that in a second. The other one is subject matter jurisdiction. Okay. So here in American jurisprudence, American jurisprudence is a legal library, but this is a collection of controlling cases that determine controlling case law, if you will, over a particular subject. So in this case, we're talking about the courts, jurisdiction of the courts, and invocation of objection to. How does the court get it? Well, let's just read this. It says the general rule is that a court cannot adjudicate a controversy on its own motion. It can only do so when the controversy is presented to it by a party, and only if the case is presented to it in the form of a proper pleading. Ooh, that's a good one, right, Kevin?
Yeah, which they don't ever have.
Okay, so just keep that in the back of your mind. It says, before a court may act, there must be some appropriate application invoking the judicial power of the court with respect to the matter in question. So, going back to what I just said, the four legs of the table. The court must have subject matter jurisdiction. Well, what is that? It's right here. Subject matter jurisdiction is jurisdiction over the nature of the case and the type of relief sought, which among the various trial courts is both conferred and limited by statute. The power to award relief is an essential component of subject matter jurisdiction and may be restricted by a statute limiting the kinds of relief that can be rendered in certain kinds of cases. The court thus must have jurisdiction over the nature of the case and the type of relief sought. Okay. Going on further, it says, if the mode of procedure prescribed by statute is not strictly pursued, no jurisdiction is conferred on the circuit court.
Say that again.
If the mode of procedure prescribed by statute is not strictly pursued, no jurisdiction is conferred on the circuit court.
Okay, give us an example.
Okay, let's go back here to this law. All right. So again, we have to take off our general English hat and put on our legal terms hat. Okay. Every element of this statute must be met in order for the court, whatever court it is, to obtain subject matter jurisdiction. So you have number 1, number 2, okay, and then number 3. Number
So
2
now
is,
you have a case involving this.
yes.
Has this been met?
Let me tell you. Okay,
Okay.
I'm getting there. Okay?
Okay.
So number 2 is definitions. Okay, so this is what so these have to be met.
Okay.
Number 3 tells what the violation is. So number 1 has 2 sections, A or B. It's either A or B. It can possibly be both, but generally speaking, it's A or B. So it says a person. I want you guys to look at that word, person. All right, a person is guilty of criminal trespass. Okay. If they enter or remain, if notice has been given by personal communication to the person by a school official or individual with apparent authority. I mean, what does that even mean? What's apparent authority? Kevin, what does apparent authority mean?
This sounds void for vagueness to me.
Sounds pretty arbitrary and capricious, doesn't it? I mean,
So,
that's pretty
somebody walks in with a badge on or a shirt, they apparently have authority.
well, hey, I could throw a badge on my shirt and walk into a school and say, you need to get out of here.
That's what I mean. It's so loose and open.
Exactly. Okay. These are pretty cut and dry. The posting of signs, okay, that's pretty cut and dry. Fencing or other enclosures, that's pretty cut and dry. A current order of suspension or expulsion, that's a different one. Okay. These 2 right here, that's not vague at all. That makes perfect sense. An individual, a man or a woman of reasonable intelligence can come to the same conclusion. This one here, though, it's your guess is mine. And this right here, B1, was the one that my friend was prosecuted under. Okay.
Oh.
So, okay, now that we know that, let's go back and say, okay, subject matter, jurisdiction. I'm just going to give you a quick refresher over the nature of the case and the type of relief sought. Okay. So we need definitions. What is the legislative intent behind this? What did the legislature intend when they passed this law? Well, we're going to need to know, what does person mean according to the legislature? So since this is a criminal trespass, we're going to go to the Utah Criminal Code for those definitions.
Yeah, isn't there a difference between person and man?
Yes, there is. Okay. Title 76, Utah Criminal Code, Section 101.5 definitions. Okay, you have all of these different definitions. What does this mean? Bodily injury means this. Affinity means this. Dangerous weapon means this. Okay. We scroll on down here to, where was it? I don't think it was in this one. It might have been in the general provisions. Oh, where did I see it? Whoops. I apologize. I should have done a little more should have done a little more research on this before I jumped in here. I had this the other day. Principles. No, that's not it.
One thing we are is human.
I know. Preliminary. Gosh dang it! What happened to it? I actually even pled this in one of my in one of the legal briefs I had. It was under the Utah Criminal Code.
While you're looking for that, I can talk real quick if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in addition to what you're talking about for subject matter jurisdiction, in terms of you have to have the court has to be able to hear that particular type of case. So for example, the injustice courts can hear infractions in class B and C misdemeanors. Right. Just because they can see, they're allowed by statute to hear those types of cases doesn't mean they can hear your case. One of the things that Alphonse pointed out early is that, you know, you have to have somebody has to have standing in addition to that type of case to bring the matter before the court.
Again,
And the standing gets a little bit, a little bit intertwined with things, and it's explicit in Pennsylvania law. It's less explicit in Utah. I haven't been able to find any cases that explicitly reference that, but basically the standing becomes intertwined with jurisdiction when a statute creates a cause of action, because somebody has to have standing in order to invoke that statute.
there you go.
Was something that comes into process too.
Mhm.
I sent this to you, and that's another case where they don't even follow their own rules, that in order to serve a warrant on somebody or a summons on somebody, the plaintiff or the plaintiff's attorney has to sign it. And if people want to understand how corrupt the Utah courts are, they just blatantly don't even follow their own rules. So I got a summons that wasn't signed by the plaintiff or the plaintiff's attorney. It was signed by the authorized signature for the plaintiff. And I pointed that out, and they just glossed over it and ignored it.
Yep.
So
can you hold them accountable for that, Kevin?
Well, in my case, it was a small claims court, and it wasn't worth paying it another $400 to go appeal it to the next court, because you have to pay to play.
Yes.
And that's one of the big problems with the Utah courts, is if you want justice, you have to pay for it.
They know this.
And they know this. They know
for
this.
a small claims court, it's not, for a $100 ticket. Is it worth $400 to go that route? Eventually, yes. But in this case, I decided it was not.
Yeah.
So there's no remedy. There is no remedy that you can get without having to pay for it.
Yeah. So let's go back and talk about that here a second. By the way, it was here. I just glossed over it. Person. Person means an individual, comma, public or private corporation, comma, government, comma, partnership, comma, or unincorporated association. Okay. As used in the criminal codes, that's what person means. All right. So what's the legislative intent behind that then?
Good question. It seems to revolve around corporations, but they try to say that an individual, they leave that up to your imagination. Am I an individual? Oh, man.
Yeah, it's another assumed.
Yeah, that's the problem. Okay. Let me tell you too real quick as I get back to where I'm going here. Sorry, I'm jumping around pretty quick. Okay. There is this doctrine known as ejusdem generis, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to show you guys this. Ejusdem generis. Okay. Okay. This is from the Supreme Court here, Harrison v. PPG Industries. It says the rule of ejusdem generis, while firmly established, is only an instrumentality for ascertaining the correct meaning of words when there is uncertainty. Okay. We think it inappropriate to apply the rule of ejusdem generis in construing this statute. Rather, we agree with the petitioners that the phrase any other final action in the absence of legislative history to the contrary must be construed to mean exactly what it says, namely any other final action. Okay. So ejusdem generis in a layman's terms means if in the definition it says individual, corporation, association, all of these things, it's all of those things or none of those things. Okay. You also have to understand, you're going to see a lot of statutes that will say natural person, individual, when they're trying to refer or could invoke that the statute has authority over
A man or a woman.
as sovereign men and women. Okay.
Is there a definition for individual?
There is no definition under Utah law for individual.
Okay.
So if there's no definition there, you cannot go to the generic term of what individual means. Even still, again, all of the elements of this entire law must be met in order for the court to have subject matter jurisdiction, including the element of standing, like Kevin brought up. Okay. So who would have standing to bring a claim against someone if this happens? So criminal trespass upon school property. Who would have standing?
Who owns the property?
There you go. You just go back to the trespassing definitions here under American jurisprudence, and it's going to tell you whoever has the legal title to the property has standing to prosecute.
Don't
So
the taxpayers own the property?
Yeah, since it's a public school property, ultimately taxpayers do. But even still, you could take a step back and say, okay, if it's not the taxpayers, then it would be the relative school districts, because they are their own separate legal entities.
Which the taxpayers fund.
Exactly. Which means it cannot be a crime. It can only be a civil. So there's
And
your.
if you're not creating harm, if you're going there to assist or collect or
Exactly.
whatever your child, there's no crime that's been committed. It's such a mess, isn't it?
It's again, I say, okay, so looking here under a person is guilty if they do the following. A, didn't apply. B, they enter or remain without authorization. Okay, who was harmed by that action?
And who gets to authorize the parent?
Exactly. Because again, going back to the constitutional provisions, no one can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Well, what happens if you have a parent who has a firm belief and right to see to the needs of their children wherever they may be?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to deny that man or woman that right? You can't. You can't do it.
Nope.
You just can't. Okay. So my friend in this situation was prosecuted in a, first of all, it was in a justice court in Woods Cross. We appealed that up for a trial de novo, which is a whole nother story. Ultimately, he ended up just taking a plea deal because he was going to see, I'm going to get nowhere fast. But here's the thing. Let's go back to the jurisdiction here. What happens if there is a lack of jurisdiction? Okay, so going back to my friend's case, before I get to that, they did not prove, number one, there was no man or woman fact witness that had standing to bring this action, number one. Number two, it was prosecuted in the name of the city. Woods Cross City was prosecuting this. Okay, they put no ownership, evidence on the record verifying that they own the property, and there was nothing on the record verifying that my friend is a person according to the statutory definitions. So the legislative intent is clear that only legal entities can be prosecuted under this crime, and yet they tried a sovereign man. So that violated all of his due process, not to mention, like we talked about, the bill of attainder, everything else. Okay.
So now what's his remedy?
So his remedy is right here. Okay.
Is he going to go for it?
Effect of lack of jurisdiction. All right. So what happens if a court acts and they don't have jurisdiction? If you look in the record and there is nothing in the record to show that all of the elements were met, there wasn't a oath or affirmation by someone with standing bringing this action. This is what it says. The proceedings of a court without jurisdiction of the subject matter are a nullity. That is, when a court decides a matter without jurisdiction, the whole proceeding is as if it never happened. So what do we do if, let's see, where was I? I'm trying to think. I had it opened. There is a great document. No, that's not it. Give me a second. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'll find it here. What do we do when the court operates without jurisdiction? Okay, that whatever ruling was issued from the court can be collaterally attacked. It means you can attack it in another court, and you can have it vacated. So let me find.
Kevin, have you come across anything like this in the military?
Not in the military. No, their rules are
Different?
yes. Well, the jurisdiction of the UCMJ is an interesting topic because you actually have to be on orders. Essentially, you have to be full-time or you have to be activated in the case of reserves for that jurisdiction to apply. And it's very explicit to the point where people who've gotten marijuana convictions had them overturned because there was no jurisdiction. They weren't on duty. They weren't subject to the jurisdiction of the UCMJ. So in terms of a topic of jurisdiction, it's kind of interesting. But like always, they just ignore the fact that they don't have jurisdiction and steamroll proceeding according to assumption anyway.
They always do. That's just how they work. They operate that they have it, and they'll be like, "Oh, we have jurisdiction. We can do this."
Yeah.
Hold on a second here. Okay, and that's exactly what happened in my friend's case. So we actually filed multiple objections. We objected and said that this court has been deprived of subject matter jurisdiction. The judge is just like, he's like, "Yeah, it's okay. No, I'm just going to go ahead and deny that."
Right.
Well, hold on there, Judge.
Objection. I need you to make a ruling.
Back the freight train up there, Mr. Judge. You don't determine if the court has jurisdiction. That's not up to you.
Or if you do, you act without authority, and you can be collaterally attacked.
The moving party is the one that determines whether the court has jurisdiction, and we have to look in the record, the verified record.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. I want to show you this here. What can we do to vacate a void judgment? Well, this is what I love. So Richard Cornforth, let me go back to share my screen again. Richard Cornforth showed how we do this. We do this through a verified petition. Okay. Let me show you this right here. Okay.
There's a question when you have time, James.
Yep. I'll get to that here in a second. I know, gosh, see how quickly an hour rolls by? I mean, my gosh. So we're going to have to spend some more time on this, but
we'll do a part 2.
Yeah. Or 3 or 4 to spend some time on this. Okay. When the court operates without jurisdiction and it issues a judgment, it's like we said, going back to the jurisprudence, it's as if the whole thing never happened, but you have to get something on the record in another court. You can file what's called a verified petition to vacate a void judgment, and it can be collaterally attacked. Okay, so this is a sample of one here. This is in a different court in the state of Oklahoma. It says here, the plaintiff, an aggrieved party, petitions this court under this authority for a vacation of void judgment and void garnishment summons, copies of which are attached. It says the record made verifies that the court wanted subject matter jurisdiction to rule and determine that he was a judgment debtor. However, there are statements of counsel and briefs are not facts before the court and are therefore insufficient for the court's summary conclusion. Material facts must be supported by affidavits and other testimony. Okay. So you're just attacking those things. And that's how we attack this. And I'll go into more detail later on about how we go about determining, the subject matter jurisdiction and how we can attack those. And I'll give some examples of them.
James?
Yes.
Do the judges participate knowing that they don't have jurisdiction?
All the time.
So then judicial complaints would be in order.
Absolutely. Yep. Judicial complaint. It is sickening too. A lot of people do this, and it doesn't matter what court you're in, state court or federal court. I've seen it in both, but you've got to set the record, make the record, object. Every time the liar opens his mouth, object. Hey, Mr. Liar, do you have personal knowledge of this? Can you testify as such? If you can't, then shut your mouth. That's basically how it comes out. And if the judge issues, like if he just steamrolls over you like they're going to do, Kevin knows this, I'm just going to deny it. I'm just going to deny it. It's because these courts are operating under the incorrect presumption that you are an inhabitant or a member, right? Which would put you under that statutory definition of person. And that they can just now take you from a judicial court, right, into an administrative court where you have no constitutional rights, you have no constitutional right to due process of law, and they can just do whatever the heck they want to you.
What's worse is there's no accountability because they say, well, if you don't like it, you can appeal it, but now you have to pay, and now there's no accountability for the judges. And for example, that in justice courts, It's a trial de novo. So nobody is looking over them to say, hey, you decided this wrong. There's literally no accountability in the system for them to be held account, aside from a no kidding collateral attack in a federal court case, which is a large undertaking with a high risk of the bar circling the wagons and not getting remedy.
It's tough.
What does the judicial complaint do then if it's not holding them accountable?
I mean, it does, right?
That's
I mean,
their insurance.
It does. I mean, but the biggest thing again, we don't file bar grievances because we're actually going to get an attorney in trouble.
Right.
They take our grievance and throw it in the garbage.
Right.
But again, we do that because their insurance, their policy requires that they notify them every time a bar grievance is filed. So it's going to hike their rates. Everything comes down to this, guys. Everything comes down to money. So same thing with judges. Judges have to have an errors and omissions policy. They're required to carry one. So if they get judicial complaints filed against them, multiple judicial complaints, they're going to have some serious problems.
So would it behoove you to do, and I haven't researched it. I only watched that one video, research the court seal before even, so once the court is assigned to your case, right? You go in to ask for that court seal and go that route before you even get into it all and so forth.
Well, this is, so we'll just end on this for today because this is really good. Great question. And Kevin, you're gonna appreciate this one too. So what does the law say when a court must have a seal? Well, this is what it says. Here in Utah, under our judicial administration, when the seal is affixed, it says the seal of court does not need to be affixed to any document except to these three documents: a writ, a certificate of the probate of a will or an appointment of an executor, administrator, or guardian, or the authentication of a copy of a record or document, or the authentication of the signature of an officer of the court. So
according to that woman, you won't know the difference on whether the seal is valid or not unless you do your homework, because the seal is not supposed to be in all capitals. It's supposed to be in upper and lower, and it's supposed to match the actual letterhead verbatim or the document that it's on. And there's been many cases that she's finding. Anyway, that's for another subject, but don't you think that would be a good first step before you even have to go through the whole throes?
Well, I mean, it's a step in the right direction. However, her entire premise is based on California law. And California law goes into so much more detail about what the seal should look like, what it should contain, how big it should be, is it embossed, is it stamped, all of this. I could find nothing under Utah law, which is sad.
Okay.
So, but I did find that. Okay, so how do I know if this is really an officer of the court? Well, a seal is supposed to be attached. That summons that you got, Kevin, that you shared with me, there's no seal on that. So you have remedies for this, guys. You can file a motion to quash this summons and this petition. I don't even know if this is real or legit. I have no clue. I don't know who this person is.
Right.
I have no contract with them. I have no qualms with them. I have nothing to do with them. So
got a 30-second good news story. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have time.
I shot you a picture if you want to put that up there, James. Talking about jurisdiction.
Yeah.
You want visceral proof for anybody?
Was it the one you just texted me?
You just texted. Yep. Visceral proof of jurisdiction in the United States, within the United States or without the United States. Post that picture. I sent this Christmas card to my mom for 4 cents because it's without the United States. Non-domestic mail.
Wait, what?
You can send non-domestic mail. See there at the bottom, non-domestic without the United States, 4 cents. The law's on the books. It's recognized. I got a 3-cent envelope that came in my mail, but I can post that on the website, or on the Telegram. But the simple fact of the matter is the statutes and the country recognizes within and without different jurisdictions. And when you say United States, do you mean within the United States or without the United States? Like James puts on his jurat, without the United States, that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing. It was delivered.
It was just delivered this morning.
The post office plays a bigger role in our government than most people know.
Yeah. Yeah. They really do.
That's why the passports go through the post office. It's got a lot more power than the average person knows.
Yeah, you guys, at the end of the day, I mean, again, we could spend hours upon hours on this, and I wish I had the time, but I don't. Today, I should say. I will, and I want to go into this in more detail. I want to talk about what your remedies are if you get railroaded through one of these courts, whether it's a traffic court, whether it's a minor misdemeanor of some stupid crime that they want to call a crime. I want to give you guys remedy. But let's end with this question from Ian. Ian, thanks so much. You've been posting a lot of good questions. We appreciate this. So your question is this a preliminary inquiry with magistrate presiding or a direct indictment with a judge presiding? I'm assuming you're talking about the court case. It was not that we had no magistrate. There was no determination of probable cause anywhere. That the constitutions of each state are very clear that if you are accused of a crime, you have a right to an examining trial to determine probable cause. Period. Okay. And the Supreme Court, and I pled this in one of my recent legal briefs, the Supreme Court has stated that probable cause is required to be determined by someone independent of the prosecution and the police. Okay. The cop can't say, oh, I've got probable cause. Okay. The prosecutor can say, oh, the cop had probable cause. No, someone independent of that. This is the point. This is exactly what our founders feared, was that people would be rounded up, thrown into jail for stupid things where no man or woman was harmed by any of their alleged actions. And that's the sad thing that's happening is we're seeing that today.
Oh, yeah.
So
very sad.
So with that, I will give you guys, Kevin, any parting thoughts you want to add?
No, great topic.
Well, thanks for jumping on, and I appreciate you. I always do this to you. I text you like an hour and a half before. It's like, hey, can you join us? I'll do better next time, I promise. So thanks for jumping on. Justice, anything else you want to throw in before we wrap it up and throw it into next year?
No, except for, if there's subject matter that you would like to have covered, I always try to stay towards the beginning mindset when we do these and ask the elementary questions, because somebody's waking up new every day. Someone's getting involved in this new every day. And we want to make sure that you don't get frightened with terminology and things like that. So don't let anything scare you. We're always available to, go back to step one. So post it in chat, let us know if there's a topic, like, for instance, I would like to go through very elementary, it's not a big deal, but going through bar grievances and judicial complaints. I think it's an important element to hold these people accountable. If it hits their insurance, why not? Right? It's easy for us.
Yeah.
So, Right. Why not? Why do they continue to get away with these things when we do have some remedy? And if it's going to cost them their insurance or have to switch insurance companies or whatever, who knows? But there's simple little things that we can do that, like Kevin said, don't cost you $400. And sometimes it's pesky enough to make them go away. So just post it in chat, topics or things that you're not understanding you'd like for James and Kevin or whomever our guests may be to go over. And don't be afraid to take action and keep learning. And I would like to point out it's just slipped my mind. What's the university that teach Constitutional University?
Hillsdale?
Yes, Hillsdale. Hillsdale College.
Hillsdale College, yes. I was going to say Liberty.
Yeah, a lot of free stuff online.
Yes.
Our Crashing Justice channel has the Constitution 101 of theirs that you can listen to in parts. Mm-hmm. So go back and start to relearn these things so that you do have some power. Yeah. But Hillsdale is a great website. They have a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, they do. Another really good resource is the John Birch Society. Mm-hmm. Search for them on YouTube, the John Birch Society. There's a lecture series. It's 6 videos. And it's titled "The Constitution is the Solution." It's a great series. There's a lot of things. I learned so much from that. I learned about the true meaning and purpose of the Second Amendment. Okay, when you read that, I mean, I'll just leave this to you here: is that the United States was never supposed to have a standing army for longer than 2 years. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
That was another major fear of the founders, is that if we have a standing army, that they could be used against the people.
Mhm.
So that is why the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, because of the preceding part of that is that a well-regulated militia being necessary to secure the rights of the people. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Right. And also, as you mentioned before, Richard Cornforth, he's got a website.
Yep. Richard Cornforth's got good stuff. You can order books from him. He's got videos. Just dive in and look at it. And I would just leave this with you guys too. Again, I touched on this at the beginning. We talked about, okay, how does the court get the jurisdiction? It must follow the statute that they're moving under. It has nothing to do with the way that your name is styled. It doesn't matter if it's an all caps name or an upper and lowercase. That's irrelevant. It's an argument that's going to lead you nowhere. I'm not saying it's a baseless argument. It has its place, just does not have its place in court. Okay, you're not going to win. You're going to be railroaded that way.
And if you're in the military and you have questions, Kevin is he is the go-to guy.
Yeah.
I remember in the beginning of all this, he was on there, jumped on and started helping people that were in the military and stuff. So thanks so much, Kevin, and thank you for your service. Appreciate your good work and helping out our servicemen and women.
Yes.
Thanks for having me on as always.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Well, with that, everyone, I want to wish you a wonderful end to the 2022 year, and here's to the year 2023. More education coming, more action items you guys can take. Stick with us here at the Justice Revolution. Until then, take care, everyone. Thank you.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.